This is the lecture for February 1st for Spiritual Leadership and Social Justice. I got off the track a bit with the lectures, so I'm going to give a few brief remarks for this week and catch us up next week. But I'm going to begin on a personal note, a kind of confession, if you will. When it comes to social witness, I sometimes ask myself, are you a fraud? Are you a hypocrite? Do you practice what you preach? Because I think about how many times I have failed to speak out against an injustice or let an opportunity go by to help alleviate suffering. I think about my own consumption. I like nice things too much. I like my stuff. I'm deeply implicated in the systemic powers of privilege, domination, and hegemony. I also grew up in a racist, classist culture, which, much as I think I may have risen above that or repudiated that, I realize that it's still part of my DNA, as I take for granted much of what my social position affords. Now, I do have a history and experience with working for social justice and advocacy in a variety of ways. I work with a feminist group in Africa on resisting female child soldiering, done some child advocacy work. But then again, life is more than a ledger of what good we have done in one column and our failures in another. But God knows this, and God knows us and loves us. As we recite in the liturgy, we confess what we have done and what we have left undone. So I speak as one convicted, not as one who always lives as she should. I struggle. I desire to adopt a lifestyle of social justice. I make small changes that hopefully lead to bigger ones. As Margaret Mead once quipped, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Now, Jennifer Ayers, in our readings for this week, writes about the social witness of protest as a religious practice. Recently, we've seen protest emerging from very different ideologies, like Black Lives Matter, and then the protest of white supremacists and pro-Trump supporters. These were carried out in different ways, but religious values and views no doubt motivating some of those involved. Social witness as religious practice has an important history. The social gospel, women's movements, civil rights movements, peace movements, environmental movements. Jennifer Ayers calls upon the work of Alasdair MacIntyre, a noted ethicist who lamented liberal individualism, arguing that social morality flourishes when a society's members come from and have a moral tradition which instills virtues in its members. Virtue ethics stems from Aristotle and says that virtues are those morally good character traits. You may be familiar with biblical virtues of faith, hope, charity, fortitude, justice, temperance, and prudence. Practices that build up the good, these virtues, are described as seeking excellence. Ayers offers some critique of MacIntyre's theory that I will ask you about and we can delve into on the discussion board. But while virtue theory can be challenged, it serves as her backdrop, her rationale for the practice of social witness. Pierre Bourdieu's concept of habitus is also an important contribution. Habitus is the ways of acting, responding, living out of a group that comes out of their history or tradition, but also shapes the social order. So the question is, are we developing more of a habit of social witness? Are we advancing excellence as we practice that witness. Jennifer Ayers gives us some clues as to how to evaluate and discern practices from a theological perspective. She's indebted to James Jasper's work on the art of moral protest that says it's a kind of poetic, creative venture or way of life that aims for transformation and an alternative way of seeing things. There's a lot to ponder in Ayers' 2 chapters on the formation of identity and social movement theory, etc. Now, one of the reasons that I selected the book Another Way for one of our texts was because of the storytelling style that it has. We learn the stories of the authors as they write about their call to another way for our world in their own lives, and it is a narrative quest. As much as it is important to engage in academic, moral, and theological discourse and to learn theory, it's also important to see that social witness is a narrative journey. So this week you'll read and respond to Creating Hospitable Space. I will invite us to hear the sound of the genuine in each other. Though I can't do it justice, I'm going to close today with words from poet laureate Amanda Gorman, who recently graced us with her wisdom. Some selections from The Hill We Climb. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours. Before we know it, somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. Amen.